Hey, you're listening to the Intentional Documentary Podcast. So glad to have you. Around here, I'm gushing over the stories behind the pictures that we freaking love of our own lives. You know, the ones we hold as high value and iconic, because this is where photography meets real life. I'm your host, Marie Moss, and I believe that the best way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Through insightful conversations with photographers, I'll explore preserving life with your camera and using what lights you up to grow your brand. Let's get started. I came across Angela Yarbrough over on Instagram because of a photograph with a four-wheeler in it. I've got a soft place in my heart for all things motorsports. I grew up in northern Michigan, so I was always on a four-wheeler or a snowmobile, like my whole life. So I saw this picture, it stood out to me, and then I went over to her feed. I mean, that's what happens when you're on social media, right? You see something and it leads you to the next place because it had piqued your interest in one way or another. That's exactly what happened. And when I landed on Angela's feed, it wasn't what my typical experience in landing on another photographer's feed. Most of the time on another photographer's feed, whether they're in business or not, it seems like most of the shares are a big spotlight of their children. I mean, if you go to my personal Instagram account, I'm guilty of that too. And not that there's any guilt around that. It's not that there's anything bad around that. But what I noticed about Angela's was that I felt a different experience vibe. I felt like I wasn't only getting a piece of her life, her child, but I was getting more of the big picture. And I think that there's something that we can all learn from doing exactly that. And I mean, we are all more than a parent, or maybe you're not a parent and maybe there's a trend with the one thing that you're sharing. So that's kind of really like the overall thing. If we're all focused on like one or two things that we're sharing, how could we give people a little bit more of the bigger picture? So in this episode, we talk about how Angela intuitively documents her life and how she's decided not to pursue the documentary family photography approach in her business, at least right now. We've talked about how online interaction affected Angela's photography. Then she shares about documenting her life beyond her child and motherhood. We bring up that whole piece into this. And then we talk about how Angela manages her family memories, her iconic photo story, and what working with models taught Angela, which I thought was a really fun conversation, especially for all of us who are in this documentary world. I went to a convention last year where I spoke in Connecticut, and there was a lot of presentations around posing, and I learned so much like from Lindsay Adler. She's really big over on Creative Live. She's a really high-end fashion photographer. So I even share a little bit about that. And then lastly, we talk about teaching kids about the importance of pictures. So without further ado, enjoy the story. Angela, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's really early Saturday morning. I mean, it's not that early, but earlier than we had intended. So thanks for making the schedule adjustment to pop on with me. Can you first tell us about your photography journey when you picked up the camera, basically like a glimpse over from your start to where you are today?
So I guess that was a pretty interesting start. I picked up my camera around 2009 or so, give or take. And it started with a trip to Puerto Rico from work. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take some great pictures in Puerto Rico. And that's exactly what I did. I had this like Nikon Coolpix. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible camera. And after I saw so many like castles and underwater, like I went scuba diving and took a lot of pictures, I came back and was like, oh my God, I need to get a better camera.
Yeah.
It's great, but the quality wasn't so great. And it pretty much started from there. I was in the military and I started talking to a couple people I was working with, and they were like, oh, can you take pictures of my family, or my wife's pregnant? Can you take pictures of her for me? And it pretty much started from there. And then I'd say about, 8 or so years later, it became something that I was actually, doing for me and not just for other people. And it became just this amazing part of my life. I was able to document my child growing up, document other families growing up. One of my goals was always to do birth photography, and I had the ability to do that in Fresh 48s. And it just, it went so fast, it feels like, but I definitely feel like I grew and my photography grew throughout the entire journey.
Yeah, it was like you taught yourself through working with your clients.
Yeah, basically. And I
Yeah.
thank them all for allowing me to practice on them. You look back and you're like, wow, why did they pay me to do that?
Yeah. I did notice when I was looking through your pictures, which we'll talk about why I wanted to have you on here in a few minutes. But what I did notice was that there is a difference in what I see in your personal work. It feels very much like what you share is like, I feel like I'm along for the ride in a part of your life. And your client work felt a bit more like traditional photography in terms of it was milestones like babies and like fresh 48s, things like that. So would you say like what took you in that direction and what showed you what you could like what how you could really like push yourself in documenting in your own life and how have you ever tried to really like blend the two, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I think one of the biggest things that happened to me was I moved from Austin, Texas, when I got out of the military to Seattle, Washington. And this was when I first had my kid. And I moved to this area, like Washington, and I was planning to do this documentary style photography. And I was so excited about lifestyle photography. And I just wanted to do exactly like I could just feel it. I knew I wanted to do it. I came here and then I joined all these Facebook groups, and I realized that everybody in the Pacific Northwest was a documentary lifestyle photographer. And I was like, oh my God. Like in Texas, there was a couple that, really stood out at that time. This was in 2015. And I just loved their work. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be so original when I get to, Seattle. And I was like, oh my God, everybody in Seattle is a photographer. And at that point, I realized, I started, advertising and everything, but there was a lot of competition. The market was really saturated with this style. And I was like, you know what? Let me really focus on doing that for my family, right? Like it's what I enjoyed taking pictures of. And I was like, I'm not going to let that stop me, but I'm also not going to bend over backwards trying to compete with, 200 different people. And I was like, I'll stick to what I knew and I stuck to it, and I'll really focus on pushing my personal photography to the next level, because that in the end of the day, like my personal photography is what's most important to me. It's nice to have a business. It's nice to, have money to put towards new equipment and new things. But at the end of the day, the pictures that mean the most to me are the pictures that are hanging, on the walls of my house, the pictures that are in my photo albums. And I think that's why instead of really focusing on doing that for other families, in which that's always a dream, I feel, for me, if I could do that and snap my finger and take the same pictures that I take for my family for other people, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it sounds bad, but maybe it wasn't worth the amount of energy that I knew I would have to put into it in order to market myself to be up there with, the people that were already doing it. So that's a little
Amen. I
background.
love that you said this because I think a lot of the recordings that I've done with other guests so far, they're either in business or they're not. And I love that you have the story of you were in business and now you've kind of, it's not taken off the shelf completely, but it's like stored in a box. It might be something you explore later. It might not be. But I think a lot of people, when they get into the community that we're in, and they get into the environment of the Facebook groups and following each other on Instagram, you can really feel this pressure like you need to be in business and it means something if you're not. I've seen that. I've seen people in my Facebook group say, I don't post in here because it feels like everyone's in business, so I feel like I can't. And so I love that you're not being influenced by the outside and you're just doing whatever you feel right doing.
Honestly, I think the biggest step was in 2000 and I'd say 16 or so. I was on Facebook for a while. I was a part of Self Portraits of Motherhood, which is my favorite group by far.
So good.
Moderating even the Instagram group for a while. And there was just this part of my life, I feel like there was just a lot of negativity like going around in the political world. And like I got off of Facebook, and I think that once I stopped going on Facebook, and it sounds so crazy, but I felt like my photography jumped like 10 different levels. And I was like, I don't care anymore. You know what I mean? Like I don't care if my uh picture wasn't, if rule of thirds didn't apply to my picture, like it meant something to me, and it really took me to that next level. And I think that's probably why you see on my Instagram too, like there's a real theme of like family adventure and traveling and like how I feel. I think you could probably see that in a lot of my pictures. And on my website, it's really like these are other people's moments, but the kind of moments that maybe you put in a picture frame. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah,
not necessarily story pages.
totally.
And I feel like taking that break really took me to the next level personally. And I was able to break some barriers in my personal work, and I don't regret it.
Good. Yeah, that's 100%. We were talking before I hit the record button. I was looking through the people I follow and the people who follow me just for different guests. I don't want to just turn to the people that I talk to on a regular basis, and your profile, your feed jumped out at me, and 100% it was the four-wheelers that I saw first, and I was like, I've got to talk to this girl. And that connected to me just because I grew up in the woods of northern Michigan on quads, on snowmobiles, a lot of adventure. And that, well, long story short, I won't get into all of that. We just moved to South Carolina because I'm craving more adventure. And so we're at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and there's so many things that we could do now. Whereas when I was in Michigan, where I lived was in the middle of the farm, basically, like every direction was farmland, and it was a trip if I wanted to go up north to go exploring and stuff. So it just, I saw your feed, felt this adventurous side of you, and I felt like I I see so many profiles that are just, it's just the curated images of the cute and the funny and whatever things their people's kids are doing, and you're not only showing your child, you're also showing, like, literally I feel like I'm along for the ride in part of your world, whether it's out exploring, you're showing, you have photos of you on there, you have photos of what you're doing, you have photos of you. I noticed some of the words that you say often on there, like views like this, view goals and adventure and exploring. And so it's, I just really love that I really get a sense of your life through your feed. And so that must be, I mean, it makes total sense if you backed off from Facebook and you really just started to explore who you are and doing your own thing, that you're sharing without that filter of trying to impress anybody with your pictures on your feed. You're just like, you're really just sharing from the heart. Do you think that backing off from Facebook has changed how you share your pictures? Like which pictures you share, I should say.
I think so, because I remember standing in my backyard, and I want to say 2016, and I was taking this picture of myself and my son, and it was for, I want to say it was for self portraits of motherhood. It was another self portrait, had the tripod set up, and I took it and I loved it. Like I saw, straight out of the camera, I was like, oh, this picture, like this is it. Like I can't wait to put it on Facebook. And I loaded it up to the computer, and I was like, oh my God, this is a little out of focus. Like, how did I mess that up? And I remember like trying to fix it a little bit. And I was just like, okay, like I'm not going to post it. And it hit me like then really like, why? Like, why is that? Right? Like this picture is epic. When you go through your family pictures of your great grandmas and your grandmothers and their adventures and stuff, and you're looking at them, you're not like, oh wow, her hair was not in the frame in this picture. Terrible. And really right then and there, I was like I need to get it together. Like I need to fix my life because that's not what it's about. God forbid something ever happened to me and all my son and my husband are left with is my pictures. Like I doubt that's what they're going to be looking for. And that's
Exactly.
where I was like, you know what? Like I really need to focus on that. And I think when I share pictures on my Instagram, yeah, to me, they're great pictures. Like, I'm like, oh, this is a great picture. But it's not like it's a great picture. I need other people to think that it's great. This is my great picture. And I'm proud of it for me taking it. It may not be what, the top photographers that I know think is amazing, but to me, it's everything. And I think that's what I share. I share a mixture of, I have a Galaxy Note 8 and I had a Samsung Edge like 7, and I would take pictures and I still share those on my Instagram. And it's because even those pictures, there's some pictures that, yeah, the quality is not great, but I'm still proud of it. I think that's one of the things that have really changed about me over the last decade of my life. From really caring about like what everyone would think, to, yeah, it's nice when people agree that your pictures are great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I know on Instagram, if I get 20 likes or 200 likes, at the end of the day, like that's still my favorite picture, and I still print them out and they make it either on my wall or in my little photo album. So
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that drew me to you. I don't know if you've ever heard me say this, but I have been talking a lot inside of Fearless and Framed about making simple pictures with big backstories. So they're not the pictures that you might get a ton of social media love for, but for whatever reason, that photo speaks to you because it's probably relates to a part of your life or an experience or a person that matters or whatever the case may be, which is clearly what you're doing. You're sharing the stuff that means something to you, and your feed is pretty engaged with people. And I have no doubt that it's because people feel like they know you a little bit through your pictures. You're not just showing a curated moment. This is an experience, and people, I think they really respond to that. Just doing a little bit of Instagram stalking. It's like just people, you don't have that feed where people are just like ignoring your posts. Like people are responding to it. So I love that. So I want to actually, speaking of printing, ask you, what do you do with your photos that you're making for yourself? Do you have like some sort of system in place, or are they on a hard drive? Are they getting printed?
they need to be on a hard drive. I probably take way too many pictures. Okay, so for the most part, and this is something that probably not a lot of people do, but I've been on this real big, and my husband probably hates me for it, but I'm obsessed with Instax mini film.
Oh,
And a
yeah.
lot of times I will take pictures on my DSLR and I'll print them with my Instax, and I'll keep them in my little photo album. I have them on my wall in my room. We have them throughout the house. I also print through big, like I'll use like Nations Lab. I'll print through them for a lot of pictures that I want to give to grandma, or, have on our wall.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it's like I journal, I would say. Doesn't really matter. I don't use my home printer, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Tried that before, not the best.
Yeah.
But as far as our little adventures, I really love the Instax feel. I've also dabbled in like some film photography, and one of my friends and I, we also started looking into disposable film. She basically tempted me into buying one of the Kodak, you throw the camera away afterwards, and that's something that's pretty cool too. You get the film developed and just stick it in an old photo album, and it's one of those things that, like, I don't think people do that anymore.
I know. I was actually wondering if they even sell those anymore, because when I was a kid, I remember them always being near the registers when you would go check out at places, and now I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah,
It's been so
there's
long
a
since I've
couple
looked.
places that do them, and with that kind of film, I don't mind getting it developed at like a pharmacy like Rite Aid or
Yeah.
Walgreens. But I actually went to go do that a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "We closed our photo lab," and I was like, "What do you mean you closed your photo lab?" And the lady could see it all over my face. Like, she's like, "Why are you bringing this to me anyways? Why don't you take the pictures with your phone?" I'm like, "Someone's going to develop my film." You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Just before Christmas, I made calendars for the grandparents of, a picture calendar. And I ordered it from the Costco that was by my house. And a couple months ago, I got a letter in the mail said that they're closing their lab, not all the Costco labs, but at that location. And they gave us a $50 gift certificate, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I wonder if that's like, if more and more places are
Yeah.
closing down.
It's so sad. It's probably one of my like biggest heartbreaks because I think that, and technology has grown like crazy in the last 10 years. And it is really at the point too now where I'm sure that a lot of people take pictures and then that's it, right? Like
Yeah.
they only make it to the computer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually guilty of that now that I think about it. Not with my pictures, but I recently had our family pictures done
Mm.
by an amazing photographer. And that was in, I want to say fall. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get them printed. I want to get them printed. And I realized that just right now, I realized I haven't gotten them printed yet. But for some reason in my head, like all my pictures end up getting printed, but her pictures were great. And I'm like, you know what? I need to get those printed. Like I'm going to put an order in after this.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you accountable when I send you the mini mag. I'm going to say, did you print any?
Yeah, exactly.
So do you document your life, your journey, your experiences in any other way? I did catch the word journal a minute ago. So are you an avid like journaler about stuff? Do you write letters to Ezra? Is that his name? I think so.
Yes, I do. I'll say I'm not as, I guess, obsessed with it as I was in his first probably 2 years of life. But I have a journal that especially milestones and stuff, I'll write letters to him. Mm-hmm. And even my husband sometimes, I have the journal and I'll write in there. And I guess one of the things that, like for me, is that, like I was saying in my bio, like I had a pretty rough childhood, and I know how quick your life can change without planning for it, really. And I don't know if it's like a good thing or a bad thing, but it's really important for me, for my family, to know exactly how I feel about them, and that I've always felt that way about them. And whether that's in a journal or just in the pictures that I've taken of them, like I just want to be able to, everyone talks about like what they want their legacy to be, right? And I'm not saying I want my legacy to be a photographer, but like I want, my kid or maybe his kids in the future and my husband, even myself, like to be able to look back and be like, wow, like this is how I felt. You know what I mean? I don't want to forget.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff that I take pictures of, that aren't necessarily smiling moments. I remember having a picture of my son like screaming at his worst, and I took a picture of it and I was like, oh, this is epic.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to remember this forever. You know what I mean? And whereas some people might be like, Ezra, you need to smile for this picture. Smile. Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? I want to remember that moment. And then if that moment is raw, even in journaling, if I'm writing about it, I just want to be able to remember it. So yeah, I do journal here and there. I started the list kind of journaling as well. So every month or season, it's, like what was I thinking or what kind of music I was into. So I'm really into that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, me too. I've got a bunch of little projects I'm working on. My daughter, she is 6 and almost 6.5, and we just started writing. I've seen on Pinterest, they call it like a mommy and me journal. So I went to the store and got this little journal. I don't know, it's bigger than a 5x7, but it's pretty small. And she's only 6, so it's not like a long letter or a long story, but it's just a couple of sentences, or I'll ask her some sort of a question like, I asked her, what's one thing you want to know about me from my childhood, just to open up that dialogue. And it's been really fun writing back and forth with her. She gets all geeky about it, and she'll get a letter from me and she has to write back immediately. It's the funniest thing. But anyway, so just food for thought for when Ezra gets a little older. It's fun. So one of the things from your bio and from what you're saying, you had a lot of hardships of your childhood growing up. And I kind of think we're kindred hearts sort of in that way. I didn't really have the rough childhood I think that you had, but I did experience a lot of loss. And one of the words that you use to describe like what photography gives to you is healing. And I have used that word myself. So I think that we really connect there. And I really loved that you said that documenting helps remind you that your life right now is fantastic. It's like all these little reminders. And I really love that for one thing. And I'm wondering if you feel like what I feel is that it's not even just like it is little reminders of what life looks like, of the love that we have. Like I was saying to you before we hit record, that I look at the pictures in your feed and it, like all of us say we love our family, but looking at your pictures, I actually can believe and can see evidence that you guys truly enjoy each other's company, which I think there's a big difference there because you can have a family of 6 in the same house and they can all be doing their own thing. I remember as a kid growing up, I'd get home from school, I'd go in my bedroom, I'd close the door and I'd watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Saved by the Bell right on the backs of my pictures that I got developed at CVS and that kind of thing. But you guys really look like you look forward to spending time with one another. Anyway, that kind of strayed from my question. My question was that, do you think that through like these reminders and that sense of healing that you get from the old wounds that you've had, do you feel like a sort of a sense of security through your pictures?
Yeah, I would say that too.
Yeah.
That definitely has, the secure feeling.
Yeah,
Um, it's like locking these little moments in, and you're like, it's like your little security blanket. I'm okay. I'm okay.
exactly. And that's,
Yeah, I guess I never looked at it that way, but I could see that
yeah,
as
it's a
well.
word that's been popping up for me. And I thought just from just hearing the stuff that you said, I was like, I bet you she feels similar.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So my next question for you is I've got like so many things here. I want to like pick a good one. Well, first, actually, I want to make sure that we talk about your favorite photo ever, as you labeled it in the.
Yeah, it is my favorite photo.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, Angela sent in a picture of, this is Ezra and her husband in a tunnel in an aquarium. So can you tell us about the story behind this picture?
So this picture was actually like when I saw the tunnel, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a picture of this. Like I already knew it. But I was actually pretty frustrated because usually I'm perfectly fine with people being in the background. And like that's how I feel like my pictures usually are. They're not like super staged, especially on Instagram. But I remember this picture, I knew I was going to be upset that there were people in the background of the
Mhm.
picture. But like, I remember putting it into the computer and just like, I don't know, like I stopped. And even without even editing it, I was like, you know what? Like, this is just perfect. Like, there's a lot of things that I would change. Like, yeah, maybe I'd want the fish to be brighter, or maybe, there would be less distractions in the background. But every
Mhm.
time I look at this picture, the first thing I see is like my husband and my son interacting together, and they're both pointing in different directions, and they weren't even looking at the same things, right? Like, it's definitely not staged. You can tell. And I mean, you can see me now. You guys that are listening can't see me, but every time I look at it, it just makes me smile because I remember this was when my kid turned 3. This was for his 3rd birthday, and we drove 4 hours to the coast in Oregon, and it was just everything about that trip. Like I remember in this picture. I mean, it wasn't a picture perfect trip. Don't get me wrong. Ezra threw a couple of fits here and there, and my husband gets really hangry when he doesn't eat, and that aquarium didn't have the best of food selection. But if I were to like, I don't know, if I were to take one picture that summed up my 3-year-old's birthday weekend, this would be it. The other reason is I was a stay-at-home mom up until my son turned 3, and his birthday is July 22nd, and I started working for Amazon on July 24th. So this
Oh,
was
wow.
our first this was our last like vacation to where like I was 100%, I will say, dedicated to being a mom. And there was just so many, you know what I mean? There's so many emotions going on, and I'm willing to back out. I'm like, oh, I might have to give them back my sign-on bonus. Like, I can't do this. And this
Yeah.
picture it just has so much more than just the picture tied into it. I think that has a lot to do with why it's my favorite.
Oh gosh, I love that. I have this student, her name is Courtney Fox, and she said something in the group, and then I actually just recorded an episode that before this that I used her quote in with her permission. And she was talking about a picture of her dad and her son. And she said, this picture is more than just one story. And I like that is coming up
Yes,
with me for that. Like, this isn't just
exactly.
them in the aquarium. It is so much more than that. And that really is stirred up in you from
Yeah,
this.
definitely.
And it's so
Courtney, I'm going to
funny.
take your quote too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She, yeah, you'll probably see it on Instagram, on my Instagram soon, because I just started like putting people's like really juicy bits into
Mhm.
the like pretty little quote things to share. But yeah, when I look at this, and this is what's so funny, and this is why I love having these conversations, is I look at this picture, and that's, I mean, literally all I see is Greg and Ezra just being their total attention is in, oh my gosh, and that, look at that, and they're together, and I see that connection, and you see that, but you see so much more than that. Like, it's so
Yes,
much beyond that I never would have seen without your words and the
exactly.
story behind it, which I just think it's so important to talk about, because it just is, it helps us like really see, just whether it's photography goals and being a really quote unquote great photographer, it's important to know like how you see, but it's also just, I think it's important for us to see, to not get carried away and be influenced by what we see online other photographers doing, and to really just give ourselves that permission to enjoy the pictures that we're making for how they make us feel. And then if you're a photographer in business, that's contagious to your clients as well.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
anyway,
I
like,
think
I
one
could get
more
on my
thing on
soapbox.
that was that I also realized that in this picture, if I were to wait, until less people were in the picture, or I waited until, they were, my son's backpack wasn't hanging off his shoulder, like I would have missed this. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Mhm.
I would have missed that connection that they have in this picture. And I think I'm not saying that one, genre is better than the other, but I think that's what separates like documentary style photography.
Mhm.
Is that like if you look at my website, like there's not a lot of pictures like that on there. And
Right.
these families, yeah, maybe they have memories associated to the pictures, but like I feel like this specific picture has like a million different stories connected to it, and
Yeah.
I'll forever see that.
Yeah. It's honest. It's totally honest. And it's not honest for the sake of being honest. It's honest in that it's able to stir up so much more because it wasn't orchestrated and put together, like, I think it makes it so much more powerful. So before I let you off the hook, I want to,
Mhm.
I have your photos up here, so I wanted to talk about a few more.
Cool.
Is there any one that's jumping out at you that you really want to talk about? Or
Oh, there's just I think so. I think a little bit I would like to talk about number 10. And number
okay.
10 is a little different. So number 10 is one of the models that I've worked with before.
Hmm.
And I'd say that here in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of families, right? So like this is a good place for a lot of families to be. And remember when I mentioned earlier that I had a really difficult time getting into this style of photography that I wanted to get into.
Hmm.
And so I started, shooting around with a lot of local like agency models. And this was something that I didn't know if I could do, but I had a lot of fun with it. And I will say that like working with them um, has taught me a lot about how I take pictures in my personal life as well. And, there's a difference between like fashion photography and like editorial photography, and then just taking pictures of, okay, yes, they are, models, but taking pictures of people who, generally get their pictures taken, but not in the same sense of how they usually get their pictures taken. So I
Yeah.
started doing a couple of group shoots where like a few models would get together, and, some of them would know each other. So they interacted very well with each other. And I really found that on my website, there's the fashion tab that you can go to and see. But there's a lot of raw like emotion that you can capture doing this. And like although the events and the photo shoots are staged and planned, I feel like shooting them really taught me how to capture certain emotions. Like her face in number 10 is something that like it's intriguing. It like engages me. Would I have wanted to get more of her fingers in at the bottom of the frame? Yes, but like when I look at her, like I feel something, and I think that part taking the time to learn how to shoot them, even though it's something that was really different for me. I spent an entire year just like shooting models of
I
different.
didn't know that. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
And it taught me a lot. I think it taught me a lot about myself. So it's definitely outside of what I normally did, but it taught me a lot about myself.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because last year I traveled to the Connecticut PPA annual convention. I actually spoke at it, but I sat in listening to Lindsay Adler speak, who is, do you know who she is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so if you listening don't know who she is this world-renowned fashion photographer, and she's amazing with the stuff that she does. And I was listening to her talk about posing, and I mean, she was just like talking about the body and hands and lots of different things. And it was really cool. I learned so much listening to her about how I see, and it's definitely helped me. I had picked up on this also through what is her name? Jen Rosenbaum. And I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name, Jen. She's a boudoir photographer, and I actually took a class of hers a long time ago in like 2012 or 2013 ish. And same thing. I was learning a lot just about placement, and that listening to photographers who are very pose conscious and very, very mindful of those little details helped me to see when it's a better moment to hit the shutter in a totally documented moment, because I'm not just like clicking when people are in midway of their movement, but I can almost like predict it better when it's going to be not a more flattering shot, but when the moment's a little bit stronger. It's not like they're midway in emotion, or like when somebody's turning. I know that sometimes if they're in their full profile turn, it's better than if I got them halfway turning. If that makes any sense at all, I don't know.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think that's exactly what I was able to take away from that experience that I was able to do. And it's fun, right? Like it's always fun taking pictures of people other than your family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's always fun, especially working with people who don't mind having their pictures taken, because that was one of the areas that I struggled with shooting families too, was you always have this sense of, I had a couple of mothers here and there, especially, that are so super critical of themselves. And I forget, like, sometimes, and it's like, I've gotten to the point now where, like, I don't care, like, what I look like. Like,
same here.
take a picture of me. Like, I don't even just look at myself. I'm like, wow, it's a terrible picture of me. I'm like, oh, well, at least my family looks great. Still love the picture. But I know a lot of times, a lot of people are unhappy with how, they look, and just being able to capture certain poses or certain looks and being conscious of that, like you said, having the sense of what looks right, like, really helps when planning the picture, because I think that's a huge thing about where I am today and where I was 9 years ago, was that 9 years ago, after doing a photo shoot, I would have like 500 pictures. Today I don't have that many. It's way less than 100. And it's like, I'm conscious of every picture that I take. In that way, it's helped me too, because when I take pictures now, I will say, there's some duplicates in there, but it's not nowhere as near as it was before. It's like, okay, I know which picture I'm getting printed after I take it. And I'm not the greatest photographer, but I feel like those pictures, at least I know that that's where my bar is, right? Like, that's my standard. This is the picture. I'm not fighting for it anymore.
Yeah.
And when I push the bar and when I like make it a picture like way better than I anticipated, and then I kind of move up and I'm like, wow, like you really did good here. Let's step it up next time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it.
You can shoot a lot with a lot more intention rather than I'm like it without that fear of I'm going to miss something, so I'm just going to shoot through everything.
And my battery lasts a lot longer now.
Right. Yeah. All right. So I've got one more question, one more picture I want to bring up here. So this is Greg, your husband, I think, right?
Yep.
So he's on the beach having a drink. And I love that you included this one in what you shared with me, because I wanted to know, how, because I haven't brought this up on the podcast yet, how does your family feel with your camera around? Are you bringing it with you everywhere? Does he
Oh,
is he rolling
they're
his eyes at you again? Um, I'd
they're trained. No, I'm just kidding. I will say starting out, I'm sure my husband, especially early in our marriage, we had our wedding at Disney World and I had my camera with me everywhere. And I'm sure then he was like, why am I marrying this psychopath with a camera? But now I think just like what we talked about, intentional photographs, I think because over the years I've learned when to take the shot, it's helped them not mind my camera being
Mhm.
out. My husband knows when I pull my camera out of my purse or my bag that, oh, like I'm in business. Like this is going to be the shot. And I would say, especially since our camera phones have gotten a lot better, now I'm able to take pictures with my camera phone that I wouldn't necessarily, this may sound bad, but I wouldn't want to waste on my DSLR,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
so I'm like, oh, this is a camera phone picture. I can take it. And I think that's helped a lot. My husband's been phenomenal with my addiction. Christmases, I'm getting lenses and film. Like, it's at the point now where he knows that, like, it's a part of me
Yeah.
that he agreed to deal with.
I love how much you include him in not just in making the pictures, but in sharing as well. I think it's so important, and I don't see enough of that in our community of people photographing the other important people in their life.
Yeah.
Period.
He
So
used to carry my camera bags for me at like my photo shoots when we were engaged and, you know, our first couple years of marriage. And he's always been a supporter. The days that I'm like, oh, wow, my pictures suck. I can't do this. My husband's like, you're tripping. These pictures look just like the pictures that you're showing me. I would tell him like, oh, I need to be just like this person or I need to be just like that person. He's like, oh, let me see their pictures. He's like, Angela, like you're not. Like you're making it seem like your pictures are terrible compared to them. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
he's always been rooting for me, I will say. But the cool thing is we do go on a lot of adventures. Um, we do take our four-wheelers out and we do go on little beach adventures and hiking and camping. And he's definitely gotten a lot more comfortable now because I think he knows that especially pictures that I share of him like are our favorites. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty great. What I want to know is when Ezra gets older, how far he's going to let me go with this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've been asking. I mean, Kendall, like I said, she's only 6, almost 6.5, but I've started showing her pictures. I showed her the mini mags that I created, and it was just like, you're in a magazine, and there's going to be a lot of people that see this. And I started to explain to her why I think it's important that people see our pictures, but also getting her opinion on that. And she had this look of like, I'm a little bit embarrassed. But then when I explained to her, like, I was like, how much do you love pictures? And I was just trying to explain to her like our mission and all of this stuff. And now she's like, this is so cool. so, so
It
yeah,
is
I
really cool.
totally get what you mean. And so I would say it's just been within the last like 6 months or so, she's been a little bit more conscious of what I'm sharing. But, and on the opposite side of that, sometimes she'll be like, Mom, pull out your phone and take a picture and share it on Facebook.
Yeah,
so,
that's funny. But it's
it's just
great, like what you're doing too, because I think that, I mean, it sounds really crazy, but like I can see like where our children are going. Like
Mhm.
it's very possible, like that this type of photography, you know, on a large scale can be forgotten. I mean, it
Mhm.
sounds a little crazy, but I
Mhm.
mean, we're going full blown technical age. Like it's really important, I think, to keep our kids especially in the know of, hey, like it's okay to get it off your phone or your tablet. Like let's keep these pictures, let's keep these memories. And even though, you know, that's not the way everyone does it now, I think it would be really cool to still have those, you know, family artifacts that are not just on a computer. Because I know last year my brother's house caught on fire and my computer was at his house and I was like, oh, I didn't back up anything on that computer. And like right then and there, it makes you realize that like your computer isn't promised, right? Like we have Dropbox, but like even Dropbox isn't promised. Flickr isn't promised, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they can go out of business. What if they don't pay their monthly website dues, you know?
Right.
They're gone. Not that that's going to happen, but I think that's so important to actually, you know, hang on to these pictures and make sure they make it somewhere other than your computer.
Yeah, they last longer than the second it took to make the picture.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what happens. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. This was really a lot of fun. Can you tell everyone where they can find you, your links?
All right. Well, you can find me on Instagram at Angosaurus Rex. It's a tough one, but I am a dinosaur mom. So my website also is thisblissphotography.com. I have a couple different types of photography styles that I've done over time on that website as well. And if you ever just want to reach out, you can feel free to message me there.
Yeah, and I've got the mini mag that'll be coming out, so you can follow Angela and see all the pictures that we talked about today by downloading the mini mag. So I will put the link in the show notes for that. Sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought, but I have a number and I can never remember, and I need to write it down at the top of this, but it's you can text the number 44222 with the phrase 013 treat, and that will get you the mini mag for Angela. Or you could go to the show notes on fearlessandframed.com. Just look for this episode in our blog area and get them. So thanks for being on, Angela.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, I'm back. What did you think about all of that? For one, let's talk about what you're sharing on social media piece. Are you feeling a little braver and curious at what you could share that is not the one or two things you've been sharing all along? I would love to see you do that, and definitely tag me, especially if you're sharing over on Instagram. Tag me in it so I can see you stepping outside of your habits, I guess is the best way to put it. And then the other layer to that, I just really loved how Angela recognized that pursuing this documentary family photography business was not for her, at least right now. And that was okay. And I'm not saying quit your business, but I think why that piece really spoke to me was because I remember when I first started my photography business, which was more traditional portrait and lifestyle work, and I hated every second of it. And I tried to make it work. It was like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And I kept trying to force it because I thought it was the path that I needed to take. And I felt like Angela was a really awesome example of how if you just really pay attention, you can correct your own path. And just because you pause something now doesn't mean that it has to be paused forever. You can put some of these things on the shelf. And I hope that that gives you permission to let go of some things that maybe you didn't realize aren't totally true for your wants and your goals and desires and all of that fun stuff. So whatever came up for you today, hit me up over on Instagram at fearlessandframed. Send me a DM, and to get all of the links, see Angela's iconic photo, and grab the show notes, head over to fearlessandframed.com/025. I'll talk to you next time. Thank you to our podcast team for making the Intentional Documentary podcast possible. Our sound editor, Lucy Burgess, Minimag designer, Jillian Adriana, and our show notes manager, Ebony Rivera. Special thank you to our episode guests for openly sharing their insight. And thank you for listening, of course. Please hit the review tab to leave a rating. I'd love to read about your favorite episodes and what has really clicked for you. And remember, the only way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Photograph freely, and I'll see you next time. Visit fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast for this episode and all past episodes, show notes, and mini mags.